You know, usually when we start these deep dives, we're looking at a specific business problem, something kind of external. We'll talk supply chains or a new leadership framework or, a market trend.
Right, something we can put on a whiteboard.
Exactly. But the stack of research you've brought to the table today,
Mm-hmm.
it feels different. It feels almost, I don't know, uncomfortably personal.
It is personal. I think it has to be.
Yeah.
It's personal because it challenges the one thing most of our listeners, and let's be honest, both of us pride ourselves on.
Which is...
Being smart,
Yeah.
being capable, being the person in the room who has the answer.
Yeah, I was looking at the new source material you added to the stack at the last minute, the piece on artificial intelligence, and it just stopped me cold.
Yeah.
Because usually when we read about AI hallucinating or, making up facts, the narrative is always technical. We say, oh, the model is overfitting, or it just needs more training data. We treat it like a glitch in the machine.
That's the standard, comfortable narrative. It's safe. It implies that the machine just needs a software update, and then it'll be perfect.
But this source argues something completely different, something much more unsettling. It suggests that AI isn't failing because it's not smart enough yet.
Not at all.
It's failing because it is a perfect mirror of us. Specifically, a mirror of, and I'm quoting here, unexamined human intelligence.
That's a heavy concept, isn't it? The idea that we're not building a flawed machine, we're building a perfect reflection of our own flawed minds.
The quote that stuck with me, and I actually highlighted this twice, was, "We did not accidentally build this, we modeled it." The argument is that AI performs certainty. It fills the silence. It justifies itself. It pretends to know the answer, even when it has absolutely no clue.
Because that is exactly what successful, high-functioning adults do all day long.
Yes.
We perform knowing. We perform professionalism.
Yeah.
Think about it. When you're in a high-stakes meeting, maybe with a client or a board member, and someone asks a question you don't know the answer to, what is the gut instinct?
Oh, the instinct is definitely not to say, I don't know.
No. Do you immediately say, I have absolutely no idea, and that gap in my knowledge makes me deeply uncomfortable? Or do you construct a plausible-sounding sentence to bridge the gap and protect your status as the smart person in the room?
I'm constructing the bridge 99% of the time. I'm pulling together keywords I heard earlier. I'm nodding thoughtfully. I'm framing the issue. I'm doing everything except admitting I'm lost.
Exactly. You are prioritizing the appearance of competence over the reality of the situation. And that is the core distinction for today. The performance of intelligence rather than the orientation to reality.
Performance versus orientation.
That's the thread that ties this whole massive stack together. We're going to look at why the smartest people are often the absolute worst at learning, why the most successful organizations are usually the hardest ones to change, and how, against all odds, a 100-year-old German chemical giant managed to break that exact cycle.
So it's a roadmap that takes us from, I guess, the psychology of the individual through the mechanics of a huge corporate turnaround, and then it lands us in some pretty deep philosophy.
Right. We've got Chris Argyris from Harvard Business School on what he calls the Dune Loop. Then we've got Ed Schein from MIT on the mechanics of psychological safety.
And then the case study, the big lab experiment, is the transformation of this company Hushed into Aventis.
It's a journey from the brain to the boardroom and back again. And the mission here really is to dismantle the architecture of our own defensiveness.
Okay, so let's start with the attack on my ego. Let's talk about Chris Argyris and his classic paper, Teaching Smart People How to Learn. Just the title alone feels like a punch in the gut.
It's meant to be a provocation, for sure. Argyris spent years studying a very specific demographic, management consultants.
So the professional smart people...
The smartest guys in the room. I mean, these are people with MBAs from the top schools. They are literally paid to solve other people's problems. And he found this incredible paradox. You would think these people who are constantly analyzing other companies' problems would be the absolute best at learning how to improve themselves.
It makes sense. They should be experts at diagnosis.
But they're not. They are the worst.
Oh.
In fact, Argyris found that the most educated, high-commitment professionals are often the single biggest obstacle to real organizational learning.
The biggest obstacle? Why?
They're the most defensive, the most brittle, and the most resistant to actual fundamental change of anyone in the organization.
That feels so counterintuitive. Is it just arrogance? Is it that they think they already know everything?
It's deeper than just simple arrogance. It's about how they define learning itself and how their entire identity is constructed. Argyris makes this brilliant distinction between two types of learning. He calls them single loop and double loop learning.
And the best way to get this is the thermostat analogy, which I love because it's so mechanical and simple, it makes it click.
It's the perfect metaphor. So imagine a thermostat on the wall. Its program, its goal, is to keep the room at 68 degrees.
Okay.
If the room temperature drops to 65, the thermostat detects the gap, the error, and it turns on the furnace. It runs until the room hits 68 again, and then it shuts off. Problem solved.
It did its job.
It did its job. That is single-loop learning. You
Yeah.
see a gap between where you are and where you want to be, and you close that gap using the existing rules and programs.
Right. And high achievers are masters at this. Get good grades. Done. Hit the quarterly sales target. Done. Get the promotion. Done. They see the target, they execute the behavior, they hit the target.
Precisely. Their entire lives, from kindergarten through their MBA, have been a long, long series of single-loop victories. They're very, very efficient and very successful thermostats.
But that's not the only kind of learning.
No. Then you have double-loop learning. This is the thermostat suddenly, I don't know, waking up and asking, wait a minute, why am I set to 68 degrees? Is 68 even the right temperature for this room, for this time of year? Is the window open? Should I even be a heating system, or should I be an air conditioner because it's August?
It questions the premise. It's not just fixing the error, it's questioning the whole system that defines the error in the first place.
It questions the underlying values, the goals, the assumptions. And that is absolutely terrifying for a smart person, because their identity, their entire sense of self-worth, is tied to winning the game as it's currently defined.
They're the best at hitting the 68-degree mark.
The best. So if you ask them to question the rules, or worse, if you tell them they failed at the game, they don't process that information as data. They process it as an existential threat to their very identity.
Argyris talks about this defensive shield that goes up. He says that because these people have so rarely experienced failure, they've always gotten the A+, the gold stars, they never learned how to process failure.
They have no emotional muscle for it. It's like a bodybuilder who has huge biceps, but a completely atrophied core. They look strong, but the first time you push them off balance, they just collapse.
They're brittle.
Incredibly brittle. Argyris calls the reaction a doom loop, but I've also heard it called the doom zoom, which I think captures the velocity of it so well.
The doom zoom, I circled that in the notes. It sounds like a bad comic book villain's weapon.
It kind of is. It describes the speed of the psychological collapse. A smart person encounters a failure. Maybe a bad client meeting, a missed deadline, even just a piece of mild criticism from a boss.
So not a catastrophe, just a normal workplace event.
A normal event. But they don't just get a little bummed out or curious about what went wrong. They zoom straight into despondency. I failed, therefore I am a failure. And because that feeling of worthlessness is so intolerable to someone whose whole life is built on being worthy, they have to eject that feeling immediately. They have to push the blame outward.
It can't be them, so it has to be something or someone else.
Instantly.
Yeah.
It's an automatic reflex.
There's a specific case study in the text that illustrates this perfectly. It's the performance review meeting. Can we walk through that? Because I think anyone who has ever worked in a corporate office will recognize the cadence of this conversation. It's almost painful.
It's painful to read because it's so real. So you have a manager of a consulting team. The project went okay, but not great. It wasn't a disaster, but it wasn't the A+ work they pride themselves on.
They didn't hit 68 degrees exactly. Maybe they hit 67.
Good way to put it. So the manager wants to fix it. He wants to have a learning conversation. He wants to engage in double-loop learning with his team. So he starts by trying to model vulnerability himself.
He's trying to set the stage, make it safe.
Right. So he opens by saying things like, looking back, I think I was too controlling in the meetings, or I don't think I listened enough to your ideas, or I should have pushed back harder on the client's deadline. He is actively critiquing his own performance.
He's trying to invite them into that space. He's essentially saying, look, I'm questioning my own settings. It's safe for you to do it too.
A perfect invitation. But the team, they don't take it. They either view his admission as a sign of weakness, or maybe they think it's some kind of trap. So instead of looking at their own behavior, they immediately pivot to the client.
Right. The problem is out there.
Immediately. They start saying things like, well, the client was just unwilling to learn, or they were arrogant, or they were stupid. They claimed the goals were unclear, and the data they gave us was bad.
It becomes this parallel conversation he describes. The manager is trying to talk about internal responsibility. What could we have done differently? And the team is exclusively talking about external victimhood. Look what they did to us.
And the more the manager tries to gently bring it back to the team's performance, the more defensive and agitated they get. They start bad-mouthing the client aggressively. They wouldn't have listened even if we'd spelled it out for them.
Which is the ultimate defense mechanism.
It's perfect. If the client is stupid, then my failure to convince them isn't my fault at all. My intelligence is still pristine. My A+ is intact. I'm still the smart one. They are just the dumb ones who couldn't understand my brilliance.
It's self-protection at the absolute cost of learning anything. Argyris actually boils this down to 4 universal human tendencies that drive this defensive behavior. And when I read them, I realized this is basically the unwritten job description for any corporate executive.
It is the unspoken code of the boardroom. It's fascinating. Let's break them down. Number 1, remain in unilateral control.
Meaning never be in a situation where you don't have your hand on the wheel. You're driving.
Always. Which, if you think about it, kills true collaboration right out of the gate.
Right. 2, maximize winning and minimize losing.
Every single interaction is a zero-sum game. If I admit I'm wrong, I lose, and therefore you win. We can't both learn and get better together. One of us has to win.
3, suppress negative feeling.
Oh, this one is huge. Let's not get emotional. Keep it professional. This means you can't express frustration or confusion or fear or disappointment. You have to maintain this mask of calm, rational competence at all times.
And that leads right into the 4th one. Be rational.
Be rational. That's the trump card, isn't it? It's used to shut down any discussion that feels emotionally uncomfortable. Let's just look at the facts. Let's not get sidetracked by feelings.
But the irony is the desperate need to be rational in this context is actually a highly emotional defense mechanism to avoid the feeling of shame.
That's the trap. It's a closed loop. If you have to be in control, and you have to win, and you can't show negative feelings, and you must always appear rational, you can never engage in double-loop learning. It's impossible.
Because double-loop learning requires you to say all the forbidden things.
It requires you to say, I was wrong, I don't know the answer, I am confused, the way I've been doing this is broken, and I need your help. That violates all 4 rules.
So we have a workforce of high-powered, high-IQ thermostats that can hit any target you give them, as long as the world doesn't change, as long as the game stays the same.
But the moment the world changes, the moment the room requires cooling instead of heating, they break.
They break. And they defend the old way of doing things to the death because admitting the old way is wrong feels, to them, like dying.
Which brings us to the organizational level.
Yeah.
Because what is an organization but a collection of these defensive people?
Yeah.
If you have 10,000 people who all desperately need to be right, how do you ever change the direction of a company?
Right. How do you pivot an entire culture? This is where Ed Schein comes in.
Ed Schein is the master of organizational culture.
Yeah.
And he introduces a concept that I think is essential for understanding why 90% of change initiatives fail. He borrows it from physics, actually. He calls it quasi-stationary equilibrium.
That's a mouthful. Let's unpack that.
It sounds complex, but the image is simple. Imagine a ping pong ball hovering in midair. It looks like it's just sitting still. It looks static, but it's not. It's actually being held there by 2 opposing jets of air, or maybe water, hitting it from opposite sides with exactly equal force.
So it's not resting. It's locked in a state of tension.
Exactly. And for an organization, 1 jet of air represents the forces for change. Things like profits are down, our competitors are gaining on us, there's a new technology we have to adopt. The push for something new.
And the other jet.
That's the force for stability, the resistance. We're tired, we like the old way of doing things, we don't have the skills for this new system. Our entire identity is tied to the old product.
So the company looks still, but it's actually locked in this high-pressure struggle between the past and the future.
Right. Now, the mistake most leaders make, the classic single-loop mistake, is that they want to move the ball. They want change. So what do? They just turn up the pressure on the change jet.
They yell louder, "We need more urgency! Everyone work harder this weekend!"
They offer bigger bonuses. They threaten firings. They push harder and harder. But what happens in physics when you push harder against an equally strong opposing force?
The opposing force just pushes back harder to match it.
The resistance increases. You get more tension, more stress. The ball might vibrate like crazy, but it doesn't actually move. Or if the pressure gets too high, the ball just shoots off unpredictably to the side and the whole system crashes. You get burnout, resignations, chaos.
So Shine says you have to stop pushing. You have to do something else first.
You have to unfreeze.
Ah.
It's the first and most critical stage of his three-stage model of change. You have to turn down the resistance jet before you can even think about moving the ball. You have to melt the ice before you can reshape the water.
Okay, so how do you unfreeze a mind or a whole organization of minds?
Shine says you need 3 specific ingredients, and you need all 3. Most leaders only use 1 or 2, and that's why they fail.
The first one seems obvious, disconfirmation.
The data. The sales numbers are down 20%. The product is failing in test markets. Our customer satisfaction score has dropped off a cliff. That's the wake-up call. That's the thermostat detecting that the room is at 60 degrees instead of 68.
But you're saying data alone doesn't work?
It does nothing. We ignore data all the time if it doesn't fit our worldview. Think of all the great examples. Kodak invented the digital camera and then ignored it. Blockbuster had the data on Netflix for years. Nokia had the iPhone in their labs. They had the data.
So having the facts isn't enough.
Not even close. So you need the second ingredient, guilt or anxiety.
You have to care that the numbers are bad.
You have to feel it in your gut. You have to feel that by ignoring this data, you are failing to live up to some standard that matters to you. And Shine is specific here. There are 2 types of anxiety at play. First is survival anxiety, the fear that if we don't change, we will go out of business, or I will lose my job.
The fear of the status quo, the burning platform.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But then there's the other, more powerful anxiety, learning anxiety. The fear that if I try to change, I will look stupid. I will fail at the new thing. I will lose my status. I will lose my identity as a competent person.
Okay, so I see the bad numbers, the disconfirmation, and I feel panicked about them, the survival anxiety. Isn't that enough to make me change?
No. And this is the most important insight in the whole stack. This is the key. If you just have disconfirmation and survival anxiety, you don't get change. You get the doom loop.
You get defensiveness?
You get denial. You get the team blaming the stupid client. You get people hiding the bad numbers. You get total paralysis.
Because the learning anxiety is still higher than the survival anxiety. The fear of looking stupid is greater than the fear of the company failing.
Yes. If the pain of the problem is high, but the fear of trying to solve it is even higher, the human mind will choose denial and defensiveness every single time. It's a psychological law.
So you need the third ingredient, the magic key that unlocks the whole thing.
Psychological safety.
Now, hold on. Psychological safety has become such a buzzword. It's everywhere, and everyone seems to use it to mean beanbag chairs and no conflict, or nobody ever gets their feelings hurt, or we're all just one big happy family.
That is absolutely not what Shine means. In fact, that misunderstanding is what kills companies. That's the safety of the status quo. Shine is talking about learning safety.
What's the difference?
It's not the safety to be comfortable. It's the safety to take an interpersonal risk without being punished for the attempt. It's the ability to say, I don't know, without hearing, well, what are we paying you for? It's the ability to try a new behavior, be clumsy at it, fail, and have that failure be treated as a necessary and expected step in learning, not a final verdict on your competence.
It's balancing the equation. You have to keep the survival anxiety high. The message has to be, we absolutely must change or we will die. But you have to lower the learning anxiety. The message has to also be, and it's okay if you're bad at the new thing for a while. We expect that. We will help you.
Exactly. The example of an IT implementation in the notes is perfect. A CEO wants everyone in the company to switch to a new, complex computer system.
The classic corporate nightmare. Here's the new interface. It goes live on Monday. Good luck.
Right. So usually, the CEO just creates the survival anxiety. We are switching. The old system is being turned off on Friday. If you don't use the new one, you can't do your job. That's the non-negotiable reality. That's the disconfirmation and the push.
And if that's all there is, people panic. They find workarounds. They secretly keep using the old system. They sabotage the new one.
Of course. But in Shine's model, the wise CEO adds the psychological safety. We know this is hard. We know you're going to be slow for a month. We know you're going to be frustrated. So we're hiring coaches to sit at your desk with you. We are not going to evaluate your productivity for the next 6 weeks. We expect you to make mistakes. In fact, if you aren't making mistakes, you probably aren't trying the new features.
That is a massive shift. It creates a sandbox, a temporary zone where failure is not just tolerated, but is part of the process. It's not a verdict on your competence.
He separates the task failure from the identity failure. That is psychological safety. And it allows the person to finally unfreeze their old habit because they aren't terrified of the transition period anymore.
So once they're unfrozen, they can move into the second phase, which is changing. This is where the new learning happens.
This is where they start looking for new ways to operate. And you mentioned a distinction in the notes here between two ways of doing that: scanning and identification.
Right. What's the difference and why does it matter for making the change stick?
This is crucial. So identification is the fast way. It's when I see a role model, maybe it's a charismatic leader or it's a star employee who's good at the new thing, and I just copy them. I mimic their behavior. I start using their buzzwords. I look like I've changed.
It's a performance. I'll just do what she's doing because she just got a promotion.
But I haven't really understood why she's doing it. I haven't integrated the logic. I'm just performing the role. The problem is, if that leader leaves the company, or if I move to a different department where that leader isn't respected, I revert to my old ways immediately. The change was just surface paint. It wasn't real.
Okay, so what's the alternative? Scanning.
Scanning is when I look around at everything. I look at the leader, sure, but also look at the data. I look at my own past experience. I look at what other companies are doing, and I piece together a solution that actually fits me in my specific situation.
It's harder. It definitely takes longer.
It's much harder. It requires more struggle, more effort, more trial and error. But because I built the solution myself, brick by brick, it becomes internalized. It becomes part of my personality, my way of thinking. It's a true double loop change. I haven't just changed what I do. I've changed how I think about the problem. It sticks.
So theories are great. Argyris, shine, brilliant stuff. It makes a ton of sense. But does this actually work in the messy real world? Because we have a case study here that seems almost impossible. We're talking about Hochst,
The German chemical giant. And giant is an understatement. This isn't a nimble little Silicon Valley startup where you can pivot the culture over a weekend retreat with some trust falls.
No, this is old school. Founded in 1863, based in Frankfurt, one of the big three German chemical companies. And the text describes the culture as being made of palaces.
It was a feudal system. You had the main plant in Frankfurt, which was like the Vatican. It was a city within a city. The hierarchies were incredibly deep and rigid. The managers were all professors and doctors. They literally wore white lab coats. They were known as the gods in white coats.
And the core belief was what?
The core belief was good science sells itself. Marketing was seen as vulgar, something Americans did. Finance was just there to count the money that the brilliant scientists made. The focus was totally internal on perfecting the science.
So you have 90,000 employees, deeply entrenched in a culture of we are the best, we know best. It sounds like the ultimate rigid defensive personality from Argyris' study, just scaled up to the size of a city.
It was a fortress of single-loop learning. They were the best in the world at making chemicals. They could optimize a chemical plant better than anyone. But the world was shifting around them. The market was moving to life sciences, to genetics, to biotechnology. Speed was becoming more important than perfection. The old model of bulk chemicals was slowly dying, and Hochst was drifting toward irrelevance.
Enter Jürgen Dorman, the change agent. And the interesting thing is, Dorman wasn't an outsider hired to save the company. He'd been there for years.
Right, but he was what the sources call an internal outsider.
What does that mean?
Well, crucially, he wasn't a chemist. In a company of scientists, he was a finance guy, an administrator, a bean counter. He was viewed with a lot of suspicion. But that gave him a superpower. He knew where all the levers of power were. He knew how the bureaucracy worked. But he didn't share the religion of the place. He didn't worship at the altar of the palace. He looked at the numbers and saw a company that was slowly bleeding to death.
So how does one guy unfreeze a 100-year-old palace full of the world's most arrogant scientists? He couldn't just start yelling orders from the top.
No, because he knew that would just increase the resistance. It would be turning up the change jet and making the problem worse. If he just announced, "We must change," the professors would have just crossed their arms and waited for him to be fired, which they assumed would be in about 6 months.
So he used a strategy that perfectly mirrors Shine's theory.
Perfectly. First, he needed to create disconfirmation. He needed to prove, in a way they couldn't ignore, that the old way was broken. But he knew he couldn't do it alone. So he brought in what the text calls the heretics.
The dream team.
He went and found people who were loyal to the company, but had been marginalized because they thought differently. People who had been stuck out in the foreign subsidiaries, in Brazil or the U.S., away from the stifling culture of the Frankfurt Palace. And he brought in Ernie Drew from the American subsidiary.
Ernie Drew. The text calls him the bull in the china shop.
And that's exactly what Dorman wanted. He brought Drew to the main board in Frankfurt and basically let him loose. Drew was American. He was loud. He didn't understand or care for the polite, deferential German hierarchy. He just started asking all the forbidden questions in board meetings.
Like what?
Why do we do it this way? Why does this process take 6 months? Why doesn't anyone here care about profit? Why are we spending millions of euros on research that never goes to market? He was a walking, talking disconfirmation machine.
So Drew was the source of the anxiety. He was the bad cop.
He broke the china, so Dorman didn't have to. It was a brilliant move. It allowed Dorman to remain the statesman, the visionary who was above the fray. Drew created the survival anxiety. He made it impossible for the old guard to ignore the fact that the palace was on fire.
But remember Shine's model. You can't just have anxiety. If you just have Ernie Drew yelling at everyone, the scientists just retreat into their doom loop. You need the safety.
And this is where Frank Douglas comes in. I absolutely love this part of the story. Douglas was brought in to run R&D, but they strategically renamed it. They didn't call it research and development anymore. They called it drug innovation.
Which is a huge signal in itself, right? Research is static. It's about discovery for discovery's sake. Innovation is active. It's about bringing something new and valuable to the world.
A total reframe. Now picture this. Douglas was African-American, a brilliant scientist coming from the U.S. into this very traditional, very white, very German hierarchy. The resistance was visceral. People were literally marching outside the gates, holding signs, protesting the changes. The powerful German unions were furious. The scientists felt their entire profession was being insulted.
Talk about a hostile environment. He was walking into a lion's den.
Absolutely. Now, a performative leader, someone stuck in that Argyris doom loop, would have come in with guns blazing. I'm the boss. Listen to me. I have the mandate from the CEO. If you don't like it, there's the door.
Assert dominance. Control the narrative. Maximize winning. The 4 rules.
Douglas did the complete opposite. He knew his first job wasn't to give orders. It was to create psychological safety. He needed to show them that it was okay to be a learner. He needed to build a bridge. So he decided to learn German.
But not in secret, with a private tutor in his office after hours.
No. He did it publicly. In meetings. He would conduct his town halls in German. He would stumble over words. He would make grammatical errors in front of hundreds of people. He would pause and ask his own subordinates, what's the right word for this?
Think about the powerful signal that sends. You have this high-powered executive, the man responsible for the entire future of the company, voluntarily putting himself in a position of incompetence and vulnerability in front of the very people who are most skeptical of him.
He was modeling double-loop learning in real time. He was showing them, look, I can be bad at this specific task speaking German and still be safe. My worth as a person and a leader is not destroyed by my error. I am still the leader, but I am also a learner. It completely broke the link between failure and identity death.
And he had this metaphor about all the resistance he was getting, right? The birds chirping.
This is so profound. Most leaders hate resistance. They see it as a problem to be crushed. They want silence. They want alignment. They want everyone to nod in agreement. Douglas said no. The complaints, the noise, the anger, that's the birds chirping. That's a sign of life.
It means they care. It means they're still engaged in the conversation.
Exactly. The real danger is when the chirping stops. He said it's like the canaries in a coal mine. Silence doesn't mean agreement. Silence means they've given up. Silence means they've retreated into the doom loop and are now just sitting in their offices waiting for you to fail so they can say, I told you so.
So he didn't try to crush the chirping. He listened to it. He engaged with it.
He validated their anxiety, which had the paradoxical effect of lowering it enough for them to start listening to him. He created the safety for them to finally enter the unfrozen state.
Meanwhile, Dorman is doing something equally radical at the very top. He's dismantling the palaces to build tents.
That was the central metaphor of the entire transformation. A palace is rigid, it's heavy, it's built for one specific place, it has deep foundations, it is designed to last forever and never move.
And a tent.
A tent is flexible, it's light, you can pick it up and move it to where the opportunity is tomorrow. Dorman's mantra was, we are no longer a company of palaces, we are a company of tents.
But to get people to actually move out of their comfortable palaces and into these new tents, Dorman had to do something that seems completely paradoxical for a CEO. He had to stop making decisions.
The do-nothing strategy. It drove people absolutely crazy at first.
How did that work in practice?
Well, in the old palace culture, every decision, no matter how small, went up the chain of command. If you were a lab manager and you wanted to buy a piece of equipment for $200,000, you sent the request up to the board member. The board member signed off on it.
Yeah.
Responsibility was always pushed up.
It's comfortable dependency. If it goes wrong, the board signed it, not me.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Dorman just stopped signing. People would come to him, conditioned by decades of this hierarchy, and ask, Herr Dorman, can we approve this investment? Can we buy this computer system? And he would just look at them and say, I don't know, you tell me. It's your budget. It's your business unit. Does it make sense for you?
He was refusing to let them use identification. He wouldn't let them just copy his answer. He forced them to scan for the answer themselves.
He forced them to take responsibility. And it was terrifying for them. They hated it at first. They complained he was indecisive. They said he wasn't leading, but he was leading in a much more profound way. He was forcing the organization to grow up. He was breaking the cycle of dependency. He was saying, I will set the values. I will set the strategic direction, the why, but you have to build the tent. You have to figure out the how.
And it worked. Hawks just transformed. They spun off the old chemical businesses. They merged with their French rival Ron Poulin. They became Aventis, a life sciences leader. They completely reinvented themselves in a way that almost no company of that size ever does.
They proved the theory. They managed the anxiety. They created the safety. And they successfully shifted the entire culture from defensive performance to actual real learning. They moved from being a thermostat that just heats the room to 16.8 degrees to a system that could ask, what business should we even be in?
Which brings us to the final, and I think the most challenging part of this whole deep dive. We've gone through the psychology and the case study, but your stack ends with some fairly deep philosophy. It keeps coming back to this core concept of orientation versus performance.
This is the piece that connects everything. It's the so what of the entire discussion. Why do the smart people in Argyris' study fail? Why did the hostess managers cling so desperately to their palaces? Because their entire professional lives were a performance.
Okay, so let's define performance in this specific philosophical context, because usually in business, performance is a good thing. We want high performers.
In this context, performance is identity under pressure. It is the construction of a self, an avatar, a mask that you present to the world to stay safe and gain status. It's the smart guy, the reliable manager, the tough leader, the perfect mother. We build these shells to protect ourselves from shame and judgment.
So performance is fundamentally external. It's about how I look to you. It's about winning the argument. It's about maintaining the mask, making sure it doesn't crack.
Exactly. And because it is a mask, it is incredibly fragile. It has to be defended constantly at all costs. And that's why the consultants in the study couldn't learn, because real learning requires you to take off the mask for a moment and say, I don't know, or I was wrong.
And orientation, what is that?
Orientation is internal. It's not about how I look to others. It's about where I actually stand in relation to reality. It's about a commitment to what is true, even if that truth is uncomfortable or makes me look bad.
So Jürgen Dorman at Hooches wasn't performing the role of the genius chemist CEO. He couldn't. He didn't have the credentials.
He had no mask to wear in that world. So he had to rely on orientation. He had to look at the market, look at the numbers, and say, this is the reality, whether we like it or not. The reality is our palace is crumbling.
He didn't need to be the smartest person in the room. He just needed to be the most honest person in the room.
Honesty is a profound form of orientation. Frank Douglas learning German in public was a radical act of orientation. A performer would never, ever risk looking foolish in public. That's death. An oriented person says, my primary goal here is to build trust with my team. If looking foolish for a few minutes while I learn a new language builds that trust, then looking foolish is the most intelligent move I can make. Orientation aligns you with the goal, not with your ego.
The source material uses a really heavy term here to describe this quality. It talks about the Christ archetype. And we should be very clear here, because we have a diverse audience. This isn't a religious podcast. It's using it as a structural model for a way of being.
Yes, absolutely. It's using the figure of Christ as a structural model of an intelligence that is completely free of performance. Imagine a mind that has no pride to defend and no shame to hide. A mind that has no shell. A mind that feels no compulsion to prove anything to anyone.
The quote that stood out was, he does not argue people into alignment. He acts from orientation.
That's the key. True leadership, oriented leadership, isn't about having the best argument and winning the debate. It isn't about forcing the thermostat back to 68 degrees. It's about holding the space, holding the tension of the situation, so that the truth can emerge for everyone.
Dorman held the tension. He didn't fix the problems for his managers by signing the papers. He let them sit in the discomfort of responsibility until they figured it out for themselves. He didn't argue them into submission. He created an environment where they were forced to face reality on their own terms.
That is the ultimate act of orientation, to sit in the mess, to listen to the birds chirp without feeling the need to strangle them, to let the painful process of unfreezing happen without panicking and trying to refreeze everything back to the way it was.
And this brings us all the way back to where we started, to AI.
The mirror.
If modern AI is essentially performative intelligence, if it's just a machine that has consumed the entire internet and learned how to sound like a smart human, then it is the ultimate doom looper.
It is. It is the perfect crystallization of the defensive mind. It will never say, I don't know. It will never feel the shame of being wrong. It will just hallucinate certainty forever. It will construct a plausible-sounding bridge over any gap in knowledge every single time, even if that bridge leads right off a cliff. It is the perfect performer with none of the underlying substance.
So if the machines are rapidly becoming the ultimate performers, what is left for us? If the machine can write the email, pass the MBA exam, and sound incredibly confident while doing it, what is the uniquely human role?
Orientation. That is the only value proposition we have left. Our job is to be the ones who can feel the shame of being wrong, process it, and choose to see reality anyway. We have to be the ones who can do what the machine can't. Break the loop.
The machine can give you the answer that sounds right, but only a human can tell you if the question you're asking was wrong in the first place.
Only a human can do double loop learning. Only a human can wake up and say, wait a minute, why are we even trying to heat this room to 68 degrees?
So here's the challenge for you, the listener. And this is a tough one. This isn't just go update your resume or learn a new skill. This is deep internal work. Sometime in the next 24 hours, you're going to be in a conversation. Maybe it's a high-stakes meeting. Maybe it's a product review. Maybe it's just an argument with your partner about where to go for dinner. And someone is going to say something that challenges your view of the situation.
And you're going to feel it. You're going to feel that thermostat click on. You're going to feel that tightening in your chest, that rush of adrenaline, that powerful urge to interrupt, to explain, to justify, to defend your position. That is the doom zone starting. That is the smart person defensive shield going up.
The challenge is this. In that moment, can you catch it? Can you notice the zoom starting, and can you stop it?
Can you just take a breath and ask yourself one simple question? Am I speaking right now to reveal the truth of the situation, or am I speaking to defend my identity? Am I orienting, or am I performing?
Can you be Frank Douglas in that moment? Can you be willing to stumble over the grammar of a new idea? Can you admit you don't know? Can you say the four most powerful words in learning? I might be wrong.
Because if you can consciously choose to drop the performance, even for a second, you might actually learn something. You might actually unfreeze the situation. You might actually move the ball forward.
And if you just default to the doom loop and double down and build a better, more defensive argument,
well, then you're just a biological chatbot. You're just autocomplete with a heartbeat. You are performing intelligence, but you are not oriented to it.
Ouch. But true.
It's the hardest work there is. It's so much easier to be smart. It's so much easier to be right. It is incredibly, profoundly difficult to be oriented. But as we saw with Hochist, and as we're now seeing with the limitations of AI, just being right is a dead end. Eventually, the palace always crumbles. Only the tents survive.
We covered a huge amount of ground today. From the brittle ego of the management consultant to the physics of corporate culture to the very structural nature of the mind itself. But I think the takeaway is that clear. Stop performing. Start orienting.
And don't be afraid to take down the tent and move.
Thanks for diving deep with us. This was a heavy one, but I think a really necessary one. We'll see you next time on The Deep Dive.
Keep listening to the chirping.